She'll dive into a new hobby with all her energy, but just as quickly, she'll lose interest and move on to something else. One week, she's passionate about photography, the next, she's into cooking, and the week after that, she's suddenly obsessed with hiking. It's exhausting trying to keep up, especially when she wants me to join in on every new venture. At first, I was frustrated by Emma's inconsistency. I thought she was just flaky or couldn't make up her mind. But over time, I realized that this is just how Gemini operates. They're constantly exploring new interests, and it's not that they're unreliable, it's simply that they get bored easily and need new things to keep them engaged. If you're dealing with a Gemini like this, it's important to let go of expectations for consistency. Instead, embrace their curiosity and be willing to dive into new experiences with them. If you find that their inconsistency is affecting you negatively, communicate how you feel, but try to understand that their mind is constantly evolving, and that's part of their charm. If there's one thing that will drive anyone mad about a Gemini, it's their inability to make up their mind. It's not that they don't have opinions or preferences, it's more that they have too many of them. I've seen this play out countless times with my Gemini friend, Jason. We could be planning a simple dinner night, and in the span of 5 minutes, he would change his mind 5 times about where we should go or what we should eat. First, it was sushi. Then, maybe a burger. But wait, how about Mexican food? Oh, and pizza sounds good too. By the time we even made a decision, the whole evening had slipped away, and we were still trying to figure it out. At first, I found this incredibly frustrating. I'm someone who likes to plan ahead, and Jason's constant shifting of ideas felt like a never-ending loop of indecision. But what I learned was that this indecisiveness comes from the Gemini's mind being so fast and fluid. They naturally think through multiple possibilities and get excited by new options. The lesson here is patience. If you're spending time with a Gemini and they can't decide on something, don't try to rush them. Offer a gentle nudge, but be prepared for the fact that it might take longer than expected. You'll save yourself the frustration by embracing their thought process and being patient with their tendency to explore all possibilities. At the same time, it's helpful to set gentle boundaries if you're feeling overwhelmed by their constant back and forth. If you're on a tight schedule, don't be afraid to make a firm decision and say, "Okay, we're doing this," which can also help guide them out of indecision. Another key aspect of Gemini's behavior that often baffles people is their fear of commitment. While they're not necessarily afraid of relationships, they're often hesitant to lock themselves down, whether it's in terms of a job, a long-term partnership, or even just their personal goals. I saw this firsthand with my friend Lisa. She's been dating her Gemini boyfriend for over a year now, but it took her partner months just to define the relationship. She wasn't asking for a big commitment, just clarity. But her Gemini partner kept saying, "Let's see where this goes," and "I'm just not ready to put a label on anything." It drove her crazy, and I could see the frustration building up. But deep down, she knew it wasn't about her. Geminis value their freedom deeply. The idea of being tied down to something or someone can make them feel stifled. They want to keep their options open and not feel boxed in by commitments, even if they genuinely care about someone. But this doesn't mean they're afraid of being close, it's more about their need for flexibility and exploration. If you're in a relationship with a Gemini, try to understand that their hesitation around commitment isn't a reflection of how they feel about you. It's more about them wanting to keep the freedom to explore, whether it's other interests, people, or even their own emotional state. The best approach is to give them time. Let them come to their own conclusions at their pace. And if you're feeling anxious about the lack of commitment, have a calm, honest conversation about your needs and expectations. Communication is key. In the end, if both parties are willing to understand each other's desires, it'll be easier to find common ground. If you've spent enough time with a Gemini, you'll have noticed that they can be incredibly charming. It's as if they have a natural magnetism that draws people in. You know the type, those friends who walk into a room and instantly light it up, with everyone gravitating toward them. Geminis have this ability to make everyone feel like they are the most interesting person in the room. This can be both exciting and frustrating, especially if you're someone who enjoys a quieter, more reserved social dynamic. Take my friend Ruby, another Gemini, of course. I've never met anyone who could talk to strangers as effortlessly as she does. Whether she's at the grocery store or a random cafe, she's never short of new friends. But the downside of this charm is that it can sometimes make the people closest to them feel a little left out. I remember once at a party, Ruby was surrounded by a group of people, laughing and sharing stories, while I was left standing in the corner, feeling invisible. At first, I didn't get it. I thought maybe she didn't care about me anymore. But then I realized, this is just how Geminis interact with the world. They're social creatures, and they thrive on human interaction. If you're someone who feels sidelined by a Gemini's natural charisma, try not to take it personally. Their social energy doesn't mean they care any less about you. Instead, recognize that they thrive on connection and engagement. One way to deal with this is to join in on the fun. When they're in the middle of a conversation, try to join it and contribute. It's not about competing for their attention. It's about participating in their world. And if you're feeling like you need some one-on-one time with them, communicate that. They'll respect your need for intimacy and will appreciate your honesty. One of the most confusing things about Geminis is their constant mental activity. I've lost track of how many times I've been in deep conversation with a Gemini and suddenly felt like I was talking to someone who was light years ahead of me. They're always thinking, processing, and analyzing things, often in a way that seems disjointed or disconnected. One evening, my Gemini coworker, Helen, was explaining an idea for a new project. What started as a simple suggestion quickly spiraled into an hour-long mental journey with connections to philosophy, psychology, and the future of technology. By the time she wrapped it up, I felt like I needed a nap to process everything. Geminis often live in their heads, and this mental restlessness can be both exhausting and exciting. On one hand, their ability to think through ideas from all angles can lead to amazing insights and creative breakthroughs. On the other hand, it can feel overwhelming if you're not used to constantly shifting conversations and thought patterns. If you're dealing with a Gemini who's constantly on the move mentally, try to ground the conversation by focusing on the present moment. Gently bring them back to the here and now, and help them focus on one thing at a time. While it's tempting to get swept up in their intellectual whirlwind, sometimes the most productive conversations with Geminis are the ones where you help them slow down and find clarity. In return, they'll appreciate the ability to focus and calm their racing thoughts. It's no secret that Geminis are master multitaskers. Their minds work in such a way that they can juggle multiple things at once, seemingly without breaking a sweat. But here's the catch: this ability can also make them appear a little scattered or overwhelmed at times. I've had conversations with my friend Eric, another Gemini, where he'd jump from topic to topic so quickly that I felt like I was struggling to keep up. One minute, he was talking about his work presentation, then about a new show he wanted to watch, and suddenly he'd be deep into a conversation about the meaning of life. This multitasking trait is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it means Geminis can handle a lot at once and bring energy to everything they do. On the other hand, it can make them seem distracted, forgetful, or inconsistent. So, if you're dealing with a Gemini who's constantly shifting gears, it's important to be patient and adaptable. Allow them to bounce between ideas, but gently bring them back to focus when needed. If they're managing a lot of tasks, offer to help or prioritize the most important ones with them. And remember, this ability to juggle is not a sign that they're not paying attention to you, it's just that their brains are wired to handle many things at once. By now, you might start to feel like understanding a Gemini is an emotional roller coaster. But there's something beautiful in their unpredictability and adaptability. They're constantly evolving, learning, and growing, And this is what makes them such fascinating people to be around. Yes, their ever-changing moods, indecisiveness, mental restlessness, and multitasking can sometimes feel overwhelming, but when you embrace their unique qualities, you'll find yourself growing right along with them. And that's the secret when it comes to dealing with a Gemini. It's not about trying to change them or fit them into a box. It's about understanding their need for variety, mental stimulation, and freedom. When you can accept that, you'll find a deeper connection with them, and you'll start to see that all of their quirks are what make them so extraordinary. But hold on. We're not done yet. If you thought these traits were wild, wait until you hear what's coming next. Stick around, because we're about to dive into even more surprising insights into the complex, fascinating world of Gemini. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Gemini world, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends who might have a Gemini in their life. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know how you've experienced the quirks of a Gemini, or if you have any other signs you want us to explore. Don't forget to click the bell so you don't miss the next part. We were at a family reunion, and while I was enjoying the quieter moments with a few people, Lily was hopping from group to group, making friends with people she had never met before. At first, I thought she was avoiding me, but then I realized that her need to socialize wasn't a reflection of our relationship, it was simply who she is. Geminis find energy in people and situations. They can be the life of the party, and in large groups, they're the ones who make everyone feel seen and heard. But here's the thing, while their social energy is often contagious, it can also feel like you're not getting the attention you need if you're more on the quiet side. So how do you handle this? If you're someone who values more intimate settings or feels overwhelmed by constant socializing, it's important to communicate your needs. You don't need to fight against their energy. Instead, make sure they know when you need time alone or when you prefer smaller gatherings. And if you find yourself feeling a little left out in the chaos, embrace the excitement that they bring into your life. It's a way to break out of your routine and see life from a new, more social perspective. One thing that can drive people up the wall when it comes to Geminis is their short attention span. Geminis are incredibly curious individuals, and they thrive on variety and new experiences. This can be fantastic in many situations. Geminis are always discovering new things, picking up new hobbies, and diving into different passions. But it can also mean that they're constantly jumping from one thing to the next without finishing what they started. A perfect example of this is my friend, Samantha. She's a Gemini, and every few months, she'll get really excited about a new project, whether it's painting, knitting, or learning a new language. She'll dive in headfirst, dedicate hours to it, and then, suddenly, it's as though she's lost all interest, and she's on to the next thing. I remember her trying to teach me how to play the ukulele one week, only to completely abandon the instrument the following month for a new obsession with yoga. It felt like we were constantly starting things and never finishing them. This behavior is not a sign of laziness or lack of commitment, but rather a reflection of how Gemini's mind works. They get bored quickly and crave novelty, so the idea of sticking with one thing for too long can feel stifling to them. If you find yourself in a situation where your Gemini friend or partner has 1,000 unfinished projects, the key is to support their need for variety without feeling frustrated. Instead of pressuring them to finish what they started, ask them to break things into smaller, more manageable steps. For example, if they've started a new hobby and quickly lose interest, encourage them to set a small goal or finish just one part of the project before moving on to something else. Helping them build structure within their desire for novelty can allow them to feel both engaged and accomplished without killing their creativity. At times, dealing with a Gemini can feel like you're living with two people in one body. That's because, in many ways, Gemini embodies duality. One moment, they can be incredibly fun, chatty, and the life of the party, while the next, they can turn quiet, introspective, and distant. This duality is both their charm and their challenge. Take my friend Ben, for example. He's a Gemini, and on weekends, he's all about hanging out with friends, telling stories, and being the center of attention. But come Monday, he's withdrawn, preferring to be alone, reading a book or catching up on work. At first, I didn't know how to handle this shift in energy. It felt like I was constantly adapting to a new version of him. The truth is, Gemini's duality is part of what makes them so interesting. They're not two-faced or fake, they simply contain multitudes. They feel everything deeply, but they process those feelings in different ways depending on the circumstances. The best way to navigate this is by accepting that their moods can shift without warning and that it's not something you need to take personally. If they pull away, give them the space they need without overanalyzing it. And when they open up, embrace that side of them fully. The beauty of Gemini's dual nature is that it keeps relationships dynamic. It challenges both parties to be adaptable and to connect on different levels, which is ultimately what keeps things fresh and exciting. If you've spent enough time with a Gemini, you've probably noticed that they can be brutally honest, sometimes to the point of discomfort. Geminis don't mince words. When they have an opinion, they're likely to share it, regardless of whether it's what you want to hear. I've had moments where my Gemini friend, Grace, would tell me exactly how she felt about something I was doing or wearing, and while it was refreshing to hear the truth, it could also be a little harsh at times. One day, I had spent hours getting ready for an event, and as soon as I walked in, she said, "Why did you wear that? It doesn't look good on you." Ouch. But here's the kicker, Geminis don't mean to hurt your feelings. Their bluntness is simply a result of their need to be honest and transparent. They see the world in black and white, and they prefer to be upfront rather than dance around the truth. If you're the type of person who's easily hurt by criticism, this might be tough. But there's a silver lining, their brutal honesty can actually be a gift. It cuts through the fluff and gets straight to the point, which can be a huge advantage in relationships, especially when it comes to resolving issues or making decisions. To deal with this trait, it's important to approach their honesty with an open mind. Don't react defensively when they speak their mind. Instead, take a moment to reflect on what they've said. Is it constructive? Can you learn from it? When you accept their honesty as a tool for growth rather than an attack, you'll find that you're able to engage with them in a deeper and more meaningful way. And when you need to set boundaries, let them know how certain comments make you feel. They may be blunt, but they also appreciate open communication and respect for each other's feelings. It's safe to say that if you've ever been in a close relationship with a Gemini, you've probably noticed something that can be a bit maddening, their constant need for change. It's like they can't sit still, not just physically, but mentally as well. A Gemini might be completely obsessed with a new project, hobby, or idea one week, only to abandon it the next. I saw this firsthand with my friend Julia, a classic Gemini. She went through phases where she was absolutely hooked on something, whether it was learning to play the guitar, then quickly switching to yoga, and before I knew it, she had taken up painting. She would dive into each new interest with all her energy, but as soon as the excitement wore off, so did her interest. It could be frustrating, especially if I was getting invested in what she was doing at the time. But here's the thing, this is just part of what makes Gemini so unique. Their need for constant stimulation and variety is hardwired into their personality. The problem arises when others interpret this as lack of commitment or follow-through. I've seen people criticize Geminis for jumping from one thing to the next without finishing anything. But the truth is, their brains are always looking for something fresh and exciting to engage with. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just how they operate. The key when you're dealing with a Gemini's wandering attention is to let them explore without pressure. Rather than expecting them to stick with something once the initial excitement fades, encourage them to set mini-goals or break down tasks into smaller pieces. That way, they get the sense of completion and satisfaction they crave while still embracing their need for novelty. But it's also important to communicate your own needs. If you feel frustrated by their lack of consistency, it's okay to express that, but always remember that their need for change isn't about you, it's just how they stay mentally engaged. Now, let's talk about another trait that might drive you a little crazy: Gemini's ability to flirt with everyone. There's no denying that Geminis are some of the most charming people you'll ever meet. They have this effortless ability to make others feel special, and this can sometimes come off as flirtatious, especially if you're in a close relationship with them. My friend Sarah, a Gemini, is the queen of making everyone feel like they're the only person in the room. She could be talking to someone at a party, and you'd think she was flirting, but really, she was just being her naturally engaging, bubbly self. When you're around a Gemini like Sarah, it can be easy to feel like you're competing for their attention. But here's the thing: Gemini's flirtation isn't always a sign of romantic interest. It's just part of their social nature. They thrive in dynamic environments where they can connect with people, and their charm is a way for them to bond and communicate. They don't necessarily mean anything by it. And it's important to understand that their intentions aren't always romantic. If you're dating a Gemini, it's easy to feel insecure about their flirtations, but it's crucial to differentiate between playfulness and genuine interest. If you find yourself feeling uncomfortable with their flirtatious behavior, have an open conversation about your feelings. Express how it makes you feel when they engage this way with others. But also try to remind yourself that their behavior is often just a reflection of their outgoing, sociable nature. If they respect you, they'll understand your concerns and make efforts to find a balance between their natural charisma and respecting your boundaries. Another thing that can drive anyone crazy about a Gemini is their tendency to speak before they think. If you've ever had a Gemini blurt something out that caught you off guard, you know exactly what I mean. They have this quick-witted nature that makes them say whatever comes to mind without necessarily considering how their words might land. I remember a situation with my coworker, Danny, a Gemini, who once told a colleague, "Well, you always look so tired, have you been sleeping?" While he meant it as a light-hearted observation, it made our colleague visibly uncomfortable. Danny didn't realize the impact of his words until later, and it left him feeling guilty. But this is just how Gemini's brains work: they're always thinking, processing, and often speaking before fully filtering their thoughts. If you're close to a Gemini, you'll quickly notice that they don't intend to hurt anyone, they're just naturally spontaneous. So, if you find yourself on the receiving end of a blunt comment, try not to take it too personally. In most cases, Geminis don't mean to offend, they just tend to say what's on their mind in the moment. If it does bother you, the best way to deal with it is to gently let them know how their words made you feel. They're usually receptive to feedback and will appreciate your honesty. But here's where it gets tricky: while Geminis may be blunt, they can also be incredibly sensitive. Their quick reactions don't always come from a place of disregard for others. It's just their way of processing everything around them. If you feel hurt by their words, make sure to express that clearly and respectfully, so they can understand where you're coming from. This is where the balance comes in. Geminis thrive when they can be themselves and speak freely, but they also need to understand the impact of their words on others. If you've ever found yourself on a mental roller coaster with a Gemini, you know that they're often overthinkers. What starts as a simple decision can quickly become an intricate analysis that seems to go on forever. Whether it's planning a trip, deciding where to eat, or even figuring out what to wear, Geminis have a knack for making even the smallest decisions feel monumental. I've been there with my Gemini friend, Tom, who once spent an hour debating between two coffee shops because he wanted the perfect atmosphere for writing. It wasn't about the coffee, it was about every little detail coming together in the perfect way. But in the end, his decision was less about the outcome and more about how much he'd mentally dissected the process. Overthinking isn't just about indecision, it's a part of Gemini's constant need to analyze and make sense of the world around them. They're wired to see every angle, and that can lead to mental exhaustion. If you're dealing with a Gemini who overthinks everything, it's important to be patient. Instead of trying to rush them into a decision, give them the space to explore all possibilities. The key is to guide them when necessary, offering a gentle nudge towards simplicity when you see them spiraling into an overthinking loop. One thing I've found helpful when dealing with a Gemini in overthink mode is to bring them back to the present moment. If they're going on and on about every little detail, try to steer the conversation toward what they're feeling rather than overanalyzing the situation. Sometimes, a simple question like, "How does this make you feel?" can cut through the mental clutter and help them refocus on what really matters. Now, here's something that can often be a challenge when dealing with a Gemini: they can be incredibly inconsistent. They can be all about something one day and then completely switch gears the next. It's almost as if their interests are constantly shifting, and keeping up with them can sometimes feel impossible. My friend Emma, a Gemini, is a perfect example of this. Hey, everyone! Welcome back to Zen Mind Peaceful Life, your go-to spot for all things astrology, self-discovery, and inner peace. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who could use a little more Zen in their life. So, let's dive into something that's sure to keep you on your toes today: 21 reasons why Gemini will drive you absolutely insane. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, "Gemini? Really?" Trust me, I get it. But here's the thing: Geminis are not just your average, run-of-the-mill zodiac sign. They're complex, unpredictable, and let's be real, sometimes downright confusing. If you've ever tried to keep up with a Gemini, you know exactly what I mean. One minute they're all about you. The next minute they're off to their next adventure. It's like trying to catch a butterfly in a storm. But here's the good news: today, we're not just talking about Gemini's quirks for fun, we're going to dive into the why behind their behavior. I'll be breaking it down from a psychological and astrological perspective, helping you not only understand why they act the way they do, but also how you can apply this knowledge in your relationships and in your own self-growth. So, if you've ever felt lost in a conversation with a Gemini or wondered how in the world they think, stick around till the end of this video. Trust me, you'll see your Gemini friends in a whole new light. And maybe even walk away with a few helpful tips for better understanding yourself, too. Alright, are you ready? Let's jump into it. If you've ever spent any significant time with a Gemini, you know that one of their most intriguing, and sometimes baffling, traits is their ever-changing mood. One moment, they're all laughter and energy, their thoughts bouncing from one idea to the next. But the next minute, they're completely detached, lost in their own world. It can feel like you're riding a wave of unpredictability. But the thing is, this isn't something personal. Gemini's ruling planet, Mercury, is all about communication, but it's also a planet that makes their minds race at a speed that's hard for anyone to keep up with. The result? Emotional shifts that can leave you feeling disoriented, especially if you're the type of person who values stability. I'll never forget a time I spent with my friend Mia, who's a Gemini. We were having coffee, talking about life, and she was absolutely animated, excitedly sharing her plans for a trip she was about to take. In the blink of an eye, she went from enthusiastically telling me about her travel itinerary to being quiet and distant, staring out the window as if lost in thought. I was left sitting there, wondering what had happened. Did I say something wrong? Did the conversation take a wrong turn? What I learned, though, is that this sudden shift is something intrinsic to Geminis. They live in their minds, and their emotions can be influenced by an endless stream of thoughts. Understanding that their moods aren't about you, but rather a natural consequence of their mental energy, can really change the way you interact with them. When a Gemini pulls away or suddenly shifts, instead of feeling hurt or confused, try embracing their need for mental space. You don't have to chase after them or try to snap them out of it. Simply give them the space they need and let them come back when they're ready. This helps both of you grow emotionally and builds mutual respect. You've probably also noticed that Geminis can be incredibly indecisive. One moment they'll be fully committed to an idea or plan, and then, without warning, it's like a completely different version of them emerges, unsure of everything they just said. I've seen this play out many times with my friend Mark. We'd be planning a weekend getaway, and within the span of an hour, he'd go from being set on one destination to questioning everything. Should we go to the mountains? Maybe the beach? Wait. No, how about a road trip to a random city? The back and forth would leave anyone frustrated, especially when you're just trying to make plans. But here's the thing, Gemini's indecisiveness isn't about being difficult. It's about their need to see all possibilities, and that sometimes makes it hard for them to settle on one decision. Think of their indecisiveness as a sign of their mental agility. They're naturally good at seeing many sides of a situation, and their mind can quickly jump from one thought to another. But this constant evaluation can also leave them feeling overwhelmed, unsure of which direction to take. The trick when dealing with this is to offer them gentle guidance. Rather than giving them more options, which could make things worse, help them narrow down the choices. Ask questions that guide them back to the root of what they really want. It's about finding clarity in the chaos, which can bring both of you peace. If you've ever been around a Gemini for more than a few hours, you might have noticed how social they are. Geminis don't just enjoy social interactions, they thrive on them. They're natural communicators, full of charm and wit, and they have an almost magnetic presence. Whether it's a party, a casual hangout, or a work event, they're the ones making everyone feel comfortable, engaging in conversations with anyone who'll listen. But if you're someone who enjoys more intimate, quiet moments, this constant energy can feel a bit draining. I remember trying to spend a quiet afternoon with my Gemini cousin, Lily, only to find that she had invited half the neighborhood over for a spontaneous barbecue. No advance notice, just pure Gemini energy in full force. At first, I felt overwhelmed by the sheer volume of people and noise. But as the day wore on, I began to understand, this was her way of recharging. Geminis, at their core, are social creatures. Their need for interaction is a way for them to fuel their energy and feel connected to the world. They don't do well when they're isolated for too long. It can feel like they're missing out. So if you're spending time with a Gemini, it's important to recognize that their social energy isn't something personal, it's just how they operate. If you need space, communicate that in a kind, respectful way, and don't feel guilty about taking time for yourself. But also, try to join in on their social plans now and then. You may just find that their energetic approach to life is contagious, and it can be a fun way to break out of your own routine. Now, here's something that many people don't always understand about Geminis: they have a dual nature. It's not about having two personalities, it's that they embody multiple aspects of themselves, and those aspects can change from moment to moment. You could be talking to a Gemini who's lighthearted and bubbly one minute, then deep and introspective the next. This can make them seem unpredictable, and it can feel like you're constantly adjusting to a different version of them. I saw this happen with my best friend Alex, a Gemini. One day we'd talk about career goals, and the next, we'd have a deep conversation about the meaning of life. It wasn't that he was being evasive or two-faced, it's just that he was exploring different sides of himself. And every conversation allowed him to tap into a new part of who he was. This duality is what makes Gemini both fascinating and sometimes hard to pin down. You might feel like you're getting to know one version of them. But just when you think you have a handle on it, another version of them emerges. Instead of feeling frustrated, it helps to view this as part of their charm, rather than labeling them as inconsistent or unpredictable. Embrace their flexibility. Let them explore different parts of themselves, and you'll see how much deeper and richer your connection can become. However, if you're someone who craves consistency, you may need to create a balance by setting your own boundaries and acknowledging that their energy will shift, but it doesn't mean they're any less invested in the relationship. And then there's the issue of overthinking. If you've ever had a conversation with a Gemini that spirals into endless analysis, you know exactly what I mean. Geminis are natural thinkers, constantly analyzing situations, conversations, and even their own feelings. Sometimes, this deep thinking can go too far, and what was once a simple conversation can turn into a mental marathon. I remember a time when my Gemini coworker, James, and I were having lunch, and what started as a casual chat about a project we were working on quickly turned into an hour-long philosophical debate about the purpose of work itself. By the end, I felt mentally drained, as though I'd just gone on a mental journey with no destination in sight. While this kind of mental exploration can be stimulating, it can also leave you feeling exhausted. The key here is to help guide the conversation back to the present moment. If you feel the conversation starting to spiral into overthinking, gently steer it back by asking more direct, focused questions. Help them find clarity, not just in the topic, but in how they express their thoughts. Remember, they may not even realize how far their mind has wandered, so giving them a little nudge can be both kind and helpful. So, as you can see, navigating a relationship with a Gemini can sometimes feel like you're riding a roller coaster. Their emotional shifts, indecisiveness, social energy, dual nature, and overthinking can be overwhelming at times, but once you understand the root of these traits, you'll realize that there's a method to their madness. The key is to approach them with patience, flexibility, and a healthy understanding of their need for freedom and mental space. Rather than trying to change them, embrace the quirks that make them who they are. And if you think dealing with a Gemini is challenging now, wait until we dive into the next few traits that can leave you both confused and in awe. You won't believe what we have in store next. Stick around to see how these last few qualities will make you appreciate your Gemini connections even more, or make you wish you had a manual for handling them. If you've ever been around a Gemini, one thing you'll quickly realize is that they are terrible at keeping secrets. I don't mean this in a malicious way, but more like they have this compulsive need to share anything and everything that pops into their head. It's like their minds are always in overdrive, and what they're thinking is always ready to spill out of their mouths, often without considering the consequences. I remember once telling a Gemini friend, Noah, a personal story about my family that I needed to vent about. It was a moment of trust, where I just wanted to get some things off my chest. A few days later, Noah casually mentioned it during a group dinner, completely unaware of the impact it could have. I felt my stomach drop because, in that moment, it wasn't just the words that mattered, but the emotional weight of what I had shared. Now, you might be thinking, well, that sounds like a betrayal, but for a Gemini, it's not that simple. They don't always have a filter, and their minds are so busy jumping from one idea to the next that they might forget the context in which something was said. It's not an intentional betrayal of trust, but more of a lapse in judgment because they get caught up in the excitement of conversation. The trick here is setting boundaries with your Gemini friends, partners, or family. If you share something personal, make it clear that it's private. Instead of getting upset, just remind them gently that you'd like something to stay between the two of you. Over time, they'll learn to be more aware of your boundaries, and you'll be able to keep your trust intact without feeling like you have to hold everything in. When it comes to their social behavior, Geminis are social butterflies in the truest sense of the word. They thrive in group settings, always ready to mingle, network, and engage with anyone who will listen. But for those who are more introverted or prefer one-on-one interactions, this can be a lot to handle. I've witnessed this firsthand with my cousin, Lily, a classic Gemini.